All right. So I have a minute to go till 7. Yeah. Hi. Yes, it is. It is indeed. And my mouse is dropped, lost its, okay, we'll take that off there. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a busy time. It's a very busy time. Mhm. Okay, so it is 7. You want to give it a couple more minutes?
It's fine with me.
A few more minutes. Because we have a few more people, as usual, there's more people signing in. We'll give them a couple minutes.
Yeah. Linda, Linda Frescarella.
Yes.
Could I just ask you to mute your microphone when
Oh, I forgot. Yes. of
Yeah.
course.
All these stray sounds sometimes come through and people don't realize. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So Dr. Wise is a professor at the University of Maryland. She trained in it's ecological genetics. Was ecological genetics? I'm trying to remember what you wrote. So, but she,
Well, that's okay. Yeah.
she's
Genetics, whatever.
She teaches biology and she's a climate change specialist at the University of Maryland. She trained at Duke University and the University of Chicago way back when. She's worked at the University of Iowa and at Cornell, and we're fortunate to have her here in Maryland. And she's become she studies the changes of the evolution of organisms in real time in the contemporary time, and she became very alarmed about what humans are doing to the environment through her observations. And so she became a climate scientist and became interested in educating the public about climate science. So did I do a good job?
I didn't hear some of it, but I think you did a lot of homework about me.
All right.
Yeah, I think I heard you mention University of Chicago, which I know I didn't mention, but yeah,
Right.
yeah. So very diligent. Thank you. Okay, so
you might as well begin, because we have an audience and people will come in. So, and they know
okay.
It's at 7.
Okay, that sounds great. So thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to you. I really appreciate that. And I know that some of you wanted to hear a lot about gardening, and I'm sorry, I'm not giving that talk tonight. I can give that talk another time, but since this is the League of Women Voters, I wanted to give a sort of civic-minded talk about the ways that we can take action as concerned and involved citizens. So that's where I'm going with this talk today. I'll just share my screen and get going.
Volume.
Okay, so sorry, I'm seeing some unusual things on my screen. So that's why I was just looking sort of dumbfounded. All right, so what I want to talk to you about tonight is what the world could look like and could be like once we stop burning fossil fuels. And I think it's very important to sort of have a vision of what the future could be like, because otherwise, we're here in the present and it's hard to visualize what all these changes that we need to make are going to produce. So rather than just carrying in your mind a picture of some horrible future that could result from climate change, I think it's good to have an idea of a good future, the good future that we really can have if we get a grip on solving the climate crisis. So visualize a better world and then build it. The book covers that I put over on the right here are some books that I've read that I really think are terrific. In particular, I really like The Future We Choose by Christiana Figueres and her sidekick, Tom Rivet-Carnac. They were, well, Christiana is a diplomat from Costa Rica and was instrumental in getting the Paris Climate Accord. And she is really quite something, let me tell you. She introduced me to the idea of stubborn optimism, which is carry on no matter what and be as optimistic as you can, but do not give up. And I think that's pretty much the key to this. Climate Courage, this is a really great book, has a lot of good examples of local climate action. Electrified by Saul Griffith. He is really, I mean, he got a MacArthur Genius Award, but I think he really is a genius, actually. He has worked out how to electrify everything and the good consequences of that. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit. And then Active Hope, again, this is how to stay optimistic and stay hopeful while we sort of slog through this transition. So I'll give you all the details of how that's going to work during the talk. Okay, just to introduce this to you, I know all of you know all about climate change, but I just want to lay the groundwork and say we've got a great big climate problem right now. This graph shows you yearly temperatures in the red dots here from before 1860 right on up through 2022. Oh, 2021, sorry, I didn't get 22 on here. What you can see is that before or sort of during the Industrial Revolution, for a long time, things remained fairly steady. They've set that pre-industrial temperature, that's so-called pre-industrial, because it was the burning of coal during the Industrial Revolution that kicked the whole thing off. The pre-industrial temperature is sent to zero. So anything above zero is an increase that has been caused by human activity. So it took quite a while for the concentration of the greenhouse gas in the atmosphere to build up. But what you can see very clearly is after 1960, around 1970, we have just had a relentless upward movement of temperature, global average temperature. And now you can see that we are, a little bit more, the average of the last few years is a little bit more than 1.2 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial average. And if you remember the goals of the Paris Climate Accord, it's to cap that global climate temperature increase to no more than 2 degrees and preferably 1.5 degrees. So we're getting very close to the point where we're going to exceed those goals. The past 8 years have been the hottest in human history. And somewhat, to me, this is remarkable. 21 of the 22 hottest years, and we're talking hottest years in hundreds of thousands of years, have occurred since the year 2000. Okay, that's this little group right here. So we've got a big problem. And I know, again, all of you know how this has been caused, but I'll just review this real quick with this cartoon. There's the Earth, of course, and this is the atmosphere, which is artificially thick on this cartoon. It's really just such a thin layer, just a few miles thick around the whole Earth. And beyond the atmosphere, of course, is space. We don't care what's going on in space. The only thing that matters to us is what is going on in the atmosphere. That's where our oxygen is and a lot of other gases. And this is where the greenhouse gases, as they're called, the main ones, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, that's where these greenhouse gases accumulate. So what happens is the sun warms the Earth. We're all familiar with that, of course. The Earth gets hotter, and in order for things to remain more or less the same temperature, the same amount of heat has to leave the Earth as is brought in by the sun, okay? And so the heat is in the form of infrared waves. It traverses the atmosphere and goes on out to space, so long, that's great. But what happens is that the greenhouse gases, these gases I mentioned, a few others, interfere with heat waves when they are on their way out to space. And what happens is if a infrared wave bumps into one of these molecules of carbon dioxide, say, then that heat wave gets absorbed just so briefly, and it then bounces off in some random direction. It doesn't keep on moving. It like goes, over there, over there. So half the time they'll come back towards Earth after a collision, half the time they'll go out to space, but their path, the path of those heat waves, which need to go to space in order to keep the Earth cool, is interrupted, and sometimes they bounce around a lot before they're able to get out of the atmosphere. So this is the problem. The more gas molecules, more greenhouse gas molecules that enter the atmosphere, the slower the heat loss, the more warming. It's just like tick, tick, tick. We have more molecules, we're going to get more warming. Not every gas in the atmosphere is a greenhouse gas. Nitrogen, oxygen, those aren't greenhouse gases, but these are, and they have been added to the atmosphere in huge quantities by human activities. Okay, so climate impacts are increasing, and there's a lot of bad news in the media. There's a real, actually, this is a true fact. There's a negativity bias in the media because people tend to read bad news more than good news. And so the media publishes bad news more than good news. And so even though solutions to the climate problem and climate action don't get a ton of coverage in the media, there's a lot of progress that most of us never hear about. And I would first like to recommend that we stop focusing so much on the negative, because all that does is it makes me depressed, I'll tell you. And you can't just live in this negative world, okay? In order to be able to take action, you've got to see the possibilities for action. So if we can visualize a positive future and believe in it, believe that we can create it. So we can back that all up with the science, okay? If we believe it and accept that it will happen, if we act, then this is the first step towards actually making that world and getting a climate solution. So now we can get started on how we're going to do that. Okay, first I want to assure you, this is not some, fringe issue of the liberal whoever. The Yale Climate Opinion Surveys, which is a program of the Yale Climate Communication Group, they have been surveying Americans across the country since 2009, and they came up with a really good way to visualize what people think about climate change. And that is called the 6 Americas, the 6 climate Americas. And here they are: alarmed, concerned, cautious. These alarmed are, I'm alarmed. I'm past alarmed. I'm sort of freaked out, but alarmed is really worried. Highest belief in global warming, most concerned, most motivated to do something. Concerned people are not quite that worried, but pretty worried. Cautious, they know there's a problem, but they're not yet committed to really taking it as seriously as they could. Disengaged, these are folks who have so many daily problems that they don't really have time or mental space to even worry about it. Doubtful, these folks just aren't really sure, and they're sort of, doubting. And dismissive, these are the hardcore climate deniers. Note, 9%, only 9% of Americans are in this climate denier category. But again, because the media likes to give everybody equal time, it sounds like there's a lot more of those guys than there really are. If you look at this range of opinions, the 2 highest groups together make 58% of Americans. The majority are here, okay? I've got 57%. I didn't add that very well, I guess. 57% of Americans are alarmed or concerned. And these are people just like you, people who are worried about the future. They want their kids and their grandkids to have a good future, and they want to do something about it. It's very interesting if you look at the map of the US. Here's the key: 50% is sort of above white. Okay, anything that's slightly yellow or towards the dark red, these are folks who accept that climate change is occurring at different fractions. So some states like New York, a higher fraction of acceptance, but Every single state in the union has more than 50% of people who accept that climate change is occurring. Okay, so it's not as it's not a fringe issue. Okay, a paper that came out last year in a very well-respected scientific journal did surveys again, showed that 70 to 80% of Americans support climate policy. They want the government to do something about climate change. But these guys found out in their surveys that people think that less than 40% of their friends and neighbors and other people share their views. Just think about that for a minute. The vast majority of Americans want something to happen, but they think nobody else, or only 40% of them, want something to happen. The authors of this paper called this a false social reality. That is, we're operating in a world where we think that far fewer people care than actually do. And once we recognize, in fact, that the vast majority of Americans care about it, that makes it easier to talk about it, to advocate for it, because you don't feel like you're some weirdo, in this, 40%. You're in the 80% if you support climate policy and are worried about it. This was in Nature Communications, really very prestigious journal. So what do we have to do to stop climate change? I'm just going to tick down this little list. I'm only going to talk about, I'm going to talk about all of these, but not equal amount of time on all of them. We need to stop greenhouse gas emissions, which means, first and foremost, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. Here's a coal-fired power plant in Maryland that burns coal and emits a tremendous amount of not only carbon dioxide, but 85 different toxic compounds, and a lot of very fine particulate matter, extremely bad for your health. So we need to stop burning fossil fuel for power and for transportation. We need to end methane emissions from natural gas. The natural gas, it really should be called fossil gas, okay? Natural gas makes it sound very benign. It's fossil gas. It's just methane, right? It's pure and simple methane. And methane emissions are many times more damaging as far as climate change is concerned than carbon dioxide emissions. So we need to get rid of methane emissions from using fossil gas, from allowing food and yard waste to rot in landfills that produces methane, and from animal agriculture. Beef and dairy cattle don't digest their food very well, so they burp out a lot of methane. So that this is just a picture then for agriculture. And we need to control nitrous oxide emissions. That comes from over application of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. If the plants can't take up all the fertilizer, microbes in the soil convert the ammonium to nitrous oxide, okay? N2O is the formula. And that is almost 400 times as sort of potent a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. So we need to get a grip on the use of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. Finally, we need to restore ecosystems, because we are not only in a climate crisis, we're in a biodiversity crisis. And I'll talk to you about how you can increase biodiversity in your own yard with some ideas from the paper that these pictures were taken from. We need to ultimately reforest and rewild, that is, allow wild animals to inhabit these spaces up to 50% of the planet. Now, that's not going to be a problem once we are, sort of moving along in this transition. There's a lot of steps to it, and I'll tell you about it. But we can use land formerly used to grow animal feed. Okay, 70% of the crops in Maryland are used to feed animals, and that means that only about 10% of the calories in those crops actually ever make it to people. We can repurpose old highways and parking lots, repurpose our lawns, and make half of the planet hospitable to biodiversity and wildness. So I'll tell you about that a little bit. Is this going to be easy? Of course not, right? Nothing is easy. Nothing worth having is easy. And there's going to be a lot of setbacks and delays. But I will tell you, I have been doing extensive homework on this for the last 8 years. And I am feeling very optimistic for a lot of reasons. But if you're interested in that, I would invite you to come to my webinars this summer and maybe look at some of my previous webinars on this. But, basically the idea is people want to have a good future, and everyone, it doesn't matter how rich you are, everyone will feel the increasing impacts, both physical and economic. The economic impacts of climate change are growing, and they are not to be discounted. So anyone who thinks they can get away from it is, nope, not going to happen. And this is going to produce an accelerating action. Everything is happening in an accelerating pattern, not a straight line pattern, which is very slow. It's accelerating, and we're getting to the really, good part of that accelerating curve. So people all over the country are already working very hard on this, and there has been significant progress already made at, especially at state and local levels. The federal government, it just has a really hard time making anything happen, obviously. Okay, so again, here are these great books, and I would invite any of you to read these books. They're just fabulous. Okay, so let's visualize what the future could look like once we stop burning fossil fuels. Everything will run on clean electricity from wind and solar, maybe from nuclear, to a certain extent, maybe from hydro, although hydro is experiencing its own problems because of drought. If hydro reservoirs get, dry up, they can't generate electricity. So everything will run on abundant, clean electricity. And there is absolutely nothing stopping us from generating enough electricity through wind and solar to power everything we need. When we do that, when we don't have those coal-fired power plants, when we don't have methane escaping from abandoned wells or just leaking out of pipeline, the air and the water will be clean, okay? There won't be any toxic fumes. We won't have, car fumes and diesel fumes, and we won't have water pollution from power plants. Power plants discharge a lot of wastewater that is highly polluted. And of course, we're getting a lot of air pollution from cars. I want to just stress this. The air will be cleaner than anyone now alive on Earth has ever experienced. We are so used to this dirty air that it's hard to even think about what it could be like when we're not surrounded by smog. And we had a little tiny picture of this at the beginning of the pandemic when people stopped driving briefly. But, and I noticed it, but probably most people didn't notice it, but the air will actually be really clean. And that will prevent millions of deaths, because right now, up to 8.5 million or more people die globally every year. And to make it personal, a 2015 study showed that about 820 people die in Baltimore every year from the impacts of air pollution. 820 of, if you live in Baltimore, your neighbors or our Maryland neighbors are dying from health problems from air pollution. I don't think most people really realize this. I didn't realize it before that. More of us in the future world will live in cities because it's much more efficient to live closer together, okay? I live in the suburbs, okay, Howard County suburban. I live in the suburbs. I love my big, place, such as it is. It's sort of mostly garden, but it's not a very economical way to live because it requires that you use a lot of transportation. And so we have a lot of our land taken up with pavement and parking lots and highways, and we can use that land for much better things. We can make our cities vibrant, good places that are filled with plants and parks and pedestrian spaces and small scale agriculture like this community garden. Buildings can look like this with green spaces on the top. Everybody has balconies and other green spaces like this. It's not going to look exactly like that. There's going to be problems getting there, but this is the kind of thing we can build. And some cities are already trying to build spaces like this. 50% of the earth will be covered in trees and natural ecosystems. And a lot more of the agriculture will be small scale like this. And in diverse landscapes where there are trees and, here's an agricultural area, here's an agricultural area, but there's lots of wild spaces around that. One of the best things that is happening at the USDA now is that they are recommending a variety of conservation strategies for farmers. And one I particularly love is this. It's called the prairie strip. So here's soybeans or corn, probably soybeans, just like hundreds of acres of soybeans. And in between soybean fields, a wide strip of native plants where pollinators can congregate. And that boosts biodiversity like crazy and also helps to clean the water. People can do, plant native plants in their yards. People can have community gardens, as I suggested. And so we have a lot more small scale agriculture. And I think that's a good thing because many people have no clue where their food comes from or what, even what certain kinds of food look like when they're growing. A lot of kids don't understand what, even what a bean plant looks like, right? Where do beans come from? Okay, well, the supermarket. No, they come from plants. So we have a little education to do, but I think it's pretty exciting. Now, pivotal steps we need to take to get to this positive future. And so these are the things I'm going to talk about today. Electrify vehicles and appliances. And this includes buildings, electrify buildings, vehicles, and appliances. When your furnace, your vehicle, or your stove needs to be replaced, okay? Don't replace a gas furnace with another gas furnace. Recently, we have learned that gas stoves and gas furnaces and gas water heaters leak methane and other toxic gases like benzene out into your house. And so the health impacts of that are bad, let alone the climate impact. So when your water heater, your stove, your furnace needs to be replaced, replace it with something electric, okay? And we will be switching to clean renewable energy. You can do this yourself. You can choose your own energy company from BG&E. You can sign up for community solar if you don't have solar panels on your roof. It saves a ton of money. And all of these electric vehicles and appliances are going to be powered by this clean renewable energy. And finally, we need to rebuild biodiversity everywhere from your yard to abandoned highways to national parks. And I gave a whole webinar about this in 2021. And I gave several other webinars on biodiversity last year. I'll just point out here Saul Griffith's book. This is a very readable book about why we need to electrify everything and how we're going to do it. And the nonprofit called Rewiring America. Okay, here's the URL for that. Pretty just what it sounds like. Rewiring America was founded by Saul Griffith. He doesn't work there anymore, but they are leading the charge on educating people as to the benefits of electrifying their homes and their vehicles. Okay, so electrify everything. There's two parts to decarbonizing. That means getting rid of fossil fuels, decarbonizing the economy, electrify vehicles, household appliances, and municipal buildings, commercial buildings, pretty much all the buildings, and replace dirty electrical power with clean renewable power. So those are the two things I had mentioned on the previous screen. Here's a graph from Rewiring America showing that we need to do both. This is residential greenhouse gas emissions, okay? And here we are in 2020, and here's 2025. We're hoping things will decline. And if we clean up the grid, but people continue to use gas vehicles and gas furnaces, we will never get below this level of emissions. Okay, that will cause climate change to proceed, right? But if we clean up the grid to wind and solar, and we electrify buildings and homes and vehicles, then we can get our emissions down to the level where we can get climate change under control. So we need to do both things. Well, I'll get to this in a sec. Okay, so let's talk about households. I know sometimes people feel like individual behaviors don't mean very much. That is false, okay? And there's this ongoing dialogue about how all we need is federal and state action. That's not really all we need. We need to have people engaged so they will support that action. And we need to have people change out how they're doing things in their homes. So here's Saul Griffith is not only a genius engineer, but he's a good artist. And so he produces these illustrations. He has determined that households use 42% of US energy. So the choices we make in our homes about how we're going to do things make a big difference. He has also calculated there's over a billion vehicles and household machines, stoves, furnaces, water heaters that burn gas or oil or use outmoded electrical resistance. What is that? Resistance is a, sort of electronics term. And if you remember the old stoves with the coils that you could see, I mean, most electric stoves still have coils, but they're under a glass panel. But the old stoves used to have those black coils. What happens is those are like resistors. And when you pass current through there, electricity through there, they get hot, okay? So old-fashioned electrical furnaces use this resistance. It's very, very inefficient. Most of these billion machines last 10 to 20 years. So Saul Griffith makes the excellent point that there are some decisions we make every day that make a difference. What we eat, whether we waste food, etc. And some decisions that we only make every 10 or 15 years. What car we're going to buy, what furnace we're going to buy, etc. So these infrequent decisions about our furnaces, our stoves, etc., those make a big difference. So next time one of your machines needs replacing, okay, so here's a big tank of oil, or here's maybe a gas water heater, or here's a gas stove, maybe a gas furnace, and of course, gasoline powered vehicles. Next time one of your machines needs to be replaced, choose an electric one, okay? An electric vehicle. Now we're in a little rocky period making a transition to electric vehicles right now. They're building out the charging networks. They're sort of, the car manufacturers are switching as fast as they can because they see the writing on the wall. So Ford and GM are really, pulling out all the stops to build battery factories and build EVs, get the chargers out there. And so I would say within 5 years, it's going to be really easy to buy an EV and go places in it. For your furnace and air conditioning, choose a heat pump. A heat pump both heats your house and cools it down. And I'll explain it just a little bit later. But this machine will save you a ton of money. And any of you who might remember heat pumps of old, we are not in that world anymore. Heat pumps work when it's cold. And I'll tell you more about that later. Choose an induction cooktop, not one of these electrical resistant cooktops with the coils, but an induction cooktop, which works with magnets, and it heats up the food. I have a whole slide about that later. I'll tell you about that later. Choose an electric dryer, an electric water heater. You can buy heat pump dryers and water heaters, super efficient, and they save you a boatload of money. If instead, let's say you replace your furnace this year, you decide to buy a gas furnace, you're prolonging the fossil fuel era by 10 to 20 years. So that's not a good thing to do, just in terms of helping to solve the climate crisis. We can do our part by replacing our machines with electrical powered machines and supporting building out wind and solar. Okay, so let me tell you a few things that a lot of people don't know about fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are not only dirty, they're an inefficient source of energy. So here's that coal-fired power plant again. So I already mentioned out the stacks comes 85 toxic chemicals as well as carbon dioxide. So all these programs that talk about capturing carbon dioxide and power plants and, storing it somewhere, which nobody has really made that work yet, but you wouldn't know that from the news. They don't talk about the other stuff that's going to pass right past that carbon capture, all these toxic chemicals and particulates, particulate matter 2.5 means little pieces of stuff that are smaller than the width of a human hair. And this stuff is, it's really insidious. These toxic chemicals stick themselves to these little tiny particles. You breathe them in, the particles are so small, they go right across the tissue in your lung into your blood, and then you've got all this junk in your blood. This is why, in fact, living near a power plant is so deadly. But let's talk about generating electricity. When you burn coal for electricity, 67% of it is lost as heat, never becomes electricity. Only 33% of it, 33% of the energy in that coal ever makes it to your wall, okay, to your wall socket. Most of it goes up the smokestack as heat and is completely lost. So 2/3 of the energy lost. Natural gas, it's a little bit better, but we're suffering the consequences of climate change from methane emitted from mining, pipelines, and storage. There's I just sent a newsletter with an article about satellite cameras that detect methane gushing out of uncapped mines and pipelines and storage areas. You can't see methane, it's invisible, but there are special cameras which detect it. And now all of a sudden, people are seeing huge amounts of methane just gushing out of these mining areas. Anyway, that's an aside. When you make electricity out of gas, which the gas industry wants us to believe this is very clean, it is totally not clean. But between 40 and almost 60% of that energy is lost as heat. Again, totally wasted. And the rest, 42 to 60%, goes to make energy. So it's a little more efficient than coal, but not a lot, okay? Most of the energy is lost in heat in generating plants that burn fossil fuels. So in addition to the air pollution, the water pollution, we're wasting all this energy. It's shocking, really. But your car is even worse. Transportation using fossil fuels is super inefficient. So here you are at the gas pump. You're paying a ton of money for gas. Well, nearly 90% of the gas that you put in your car does not push the car down the road. It's lost as heat. So, you stop your car, you feel the hood, it's hot. Exhaust coming out of the exhaust pipe, hot. That's wasted. So when you spend $4.65 a gallon for gas, at least $3.22 of that is wasted. You might as well open up a manhole cover and drop it in. All electric saves boatloads of money because there's no more conversion. When you put electricity into an electric car, almost all of it, maybe 10% is wasted, but almost all of it pushes the car. So in order to fill up an EV, it costs per mile 3 to 4 cents. A gas vehicle per mile costs 14 to 20 cents. An EV has no maintenance charges because you don't change the oil. You don't have to change the filters because there's no filters. There's no, whatever. EVs save a ton of money, and there's no more air or water pollution from vehicles, from oil spilled on the road from vehicles, etc. So it's much more efficient to have an electric vehicle because of this basic loss of energy as heat in regular internal combustion engines. Okay, now a lot of people say that it doesn't pay to get an electric vehicle. Not pay. It is not worth getting an electric vehicle before the grid gets cleaned up. That is not true, okay? And I'll explain that on this picture on the right in just a second. Electric vehicles will address the nation's #1 cause of greenhouse gas emissions, which now is transportation. It will have huge beneficial health impacts by reducing air pollution. The purchase prices are still a little more than gas vehicles, especially now that GM has stopped making the Bolt, or will stop making the Bolt, which was the most affordable EV. They're working this out, okay? They're getting this worked out, and I'm not worried about it. In 5 years, it'll all be, EVs will be, probably cheaper than gas vehicles. Operating expenses, as I mentioned, are much lower. People worry about the batteries, but there are a ton of really smart people out there making progress on recycling the minerals from EV batteries so that we don't have to keep going and getting new minerals. Okay. Now, when you burn gas and oil, you have to keep going and mining it or drilling it because you burn it up, right? But when you have an EV battery, once you get enough of those minerals to power all the cars, then they start to be recycled. Okay. So we don't have to go and get them anymore. That is huge. Okay. That's something that is so foreign, I think, to most people, because we're just used to having the oil companies constantly drilling. And by the way, we subsidize that to the tune of trillions of dollars every year, which is on top of the profits that those guys make. To get subsidies from our tax dollars, I'm sorry, that rots my socks, as they used to say. I don't think they say that anymore. Okay, so here's a link if you want to read about that. I can send Laura a copy of the slides to distribute to you, and it'll be a PDF, and you can click on these links and go to the sources. And the nationwide charging system is expanding. Now, let me talk just real quick about why it's better to, it's cheaper and cleaner to run an electric vehicle on even on a dirty grid where some of the power is generated from coal or natural gas. And so this is from the Union of Concerned Scientists. I wasn't able to get all the states, but here's the price of gasoline. Here's how much it costs to go the same distance as a gallon of gas with an EV. Okay, so it's less in every single state. And here is the difference. Here's how much you would save per gallon if you had an EV plugged into even the dirty grid. You'd still save a lot of money. And the Union of Concerned Scientists has also shown that it is cleaner, even though there's dirty power in the grid. Once we get total clean energy, it's going to be very clean. Okay. So electrify everything and use clean power. It's super efficient. There's no conversion loss. Once you generate the electricity with wind or solar, then you send it right down to the plug in your Volkswagen, your electric Volkswagen bus. This is like blast from the past, electric Volkswagen bus. And there's no more conversion loss. Okay, there's no 88% loss of energy. You just send it from the windmill through the transmission line to your house, plug in your car, there it is. Bonus, there's no more carbon dioxide emissions, no more methane, no more pollution, water or air from mining, transporting, storing, and burning fossil fuels. This is huge, okay? Electrification will make America energy independent. We will not have to barter with the folks in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Russia, whose political system is so repressive. We will not have to barter with them or protect those gas fields for them because we won't need their oil. So it's like, okay, so long, we don't need your oil anymore. Bill McKibben wrote a great article in the New Yorker where he talked about heat pumps for peace and freedom. This was right when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started. And the point is, if everybody had a heat pump and we were all electric, we could just say, and Europe too, could say to Vladimir Putin, see ya, we don't need you anymore. And I would personally find that extremely satisfying. Homegrown energy made in the USA, and here's a heat pump with, okay, heat pump for peace. And electrifying will protect you from rising gas and oil prices, okay? So here's the price. This is just for the last couple of years. Here's the price of electricity, green bars in different months. So down here, cheaper every month, and a little bit of a rise. Here's natural gas, gasoline, and fuel oil. Whoop, okay? Because all this messing around, the politics, the Russia thing, etc., gas and oil went sky high. If you had your house powered on electricity, hey, you'd be paying more or less the same price and saving a ton of money. Okay, so heat pumps are super efficient because they do not generate heat with resistance, like I told you, remember the coils that heat up? That's how an electric furnace usually works. And they don't generate cold either through sort of, I don't exactly know how window air conditioners generate cold, but it takes more power than a heat pump. Heat pumps just transfer the heat from one place to another. So in the winter, the air from your house which is not hot enough for you, goes outside where it's very cold. However, because gases heat up if they're pressurized and cool down when they're depressurized, the air from your house is depressurized to become colder than the outside. So outside air gets transferred to it. Then it gets pressurized and that outside air gets transferred to your house. If that didn't make any sense to you, just remember that heat pumps are efficient because they only move heat around. They don't generate it by burning something, okay? Now, we're not in the 70s anymore. Or, yeah, in the 70s. I remember going home from college, okay, when I was in college. I graduated college in 1973. And my parents lived in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And they had moved from Connecticut where they had a gas furnace. And they had a heat pump. And they really hated this heat pump. And they complained about it constantly, because the air coming out of the vent was cooler than they had been used to from the gas furnace. Now, older heat pumps were not that great, and they could only transfer the heat when the temperatures were above freezing. When it was below freezing, they had a big space heater inside, and they used that electrical resistance. So that, somewhat made them more expensive. So they were very inefficient. Now, heat pumps can transfer heat when it's as low as 15 degrees below minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Now in Maryland, it almost never gets below 15 degrees. It never gets a minus 15 degrees. And heat pumps work absolutely great here. You do not need to have a backup gas system. I have a heat pump, and I have it set so the auxiliary heat, the big space heater, never comes on, and I'm perfectly fine, and it's totally cheap. So a heat pump is fantastic for Maryland, and these are some of the more efficient ones that would work in Maine. This is like the one I have. Okay, so they're very, very sophisticated. The one I have has a variable speed compressor, which means it can sort of work harder or less hard. And in the summer, before it really kicks in full speed, it dehumidifies the air. And so I find my unit doesn't really go to full speed on a hot summer day until about 5 p.m. The rest of the time, it's just dehumidifying the air, and it doesn't cost hardly anything. Okay, next innovation for you to embrace in your house: induction cooktops. Okay, now you've been reading all about, maybe or maybe not, but I'll just tell you, it's a scientific true fact that gas cooktops pollute your house with methane and benzene and other stuff you don't want to breathe. And so this is those old electric cooktops. Those are the resistance coils, the old style. Here's an induction cooktop, which I think this is I'm sorry. This is a glass top that has resistance coils underneath. Sorry, so they get red. I have one of these. I used to have one of these, of course, everybody did. This is the old style. Here's an induction cooktop. Induction cooktops transfer the electricity, the heat from the electricity, directly to the pan. This heats up the surface and that heats up the pan. Very inefficient because a lot of the heat goes into your kitchen. The burner stays cool. In fact, the induction cooktop makers have to put some visual signal like these lights to show when the burner is on, because otherwise you can't tell the burner's on. It doesn't get hot, but you could leave a burner on. I mean, it would probably turn itself off, but it never gets hot. So there's never any cooked on crud on your induction cooktop because it never gets hot. So you have a spill, just wipe it up, never burns on. It cooks so much faster. You can change it, and the heat to the pan, to the food, changes instantly, faster than a gas stove. It feels like a gas stove top because you can change the heat very quickly, but it's faster. Top never gets hot. You got to have a pan that responds to an electromagnetic field. So, stainless steel pans, cast iron pans all work. Aluminum pans don't work. I have a magnetic clasp on my Fitbit, and so I can go around my house and just see if this will stick to pans. And that way I know whether the pan's going to work or not. About half my pans work. All the ovens are still electric, but you can get a convection oven, which has a fan which moves the hot air around, and that allows you to use almost 20% less energy. Now, here's the ace in the hole for induction cooking. The induction hot plate, okay? You don't have to replace your whole stove or range or cooktop to try induction. You can get a little induction hot plate like this. Hot plate is sort of a misnomer because it never gets hot. A little one burner thing for under $100. I had a genius friend in graduate school, and she convinced me 10 years ago to get an induction hot plate. And I tried it and I thought, okay, whatever. So I put it in the cabinet, and I pulled it out about 6 months ago. And I can just put it right on top of my stove when I'm cooking, and then I move it and put it on top of the adjacent toaster oven, and it gets it out of the way. I don't use anything else except for this induction hot plate now because it cooks everything so incredibly fast. And most of you don't know me, but I am very impatient. And so I don't like to wait around for stuff to cook. This is why I cook everything on high. I used to burn a lot of stuff. Induction cooktops, they are for people who do not like to stand around and wait for stuff to heat up. And again, you can try one of these for less than $100. Totally worth it. Okay, your laundry. Gas polluters, gas dryers are just as polluting as gas cooktops. And the insidious thing is these gas appliances leak methane and other gases even when they're turned off. Even if there's no pilot light or anything, they're electronic ignition, they still leak this stuff. But you can get Energy Star electric washer and dryer. Like I don't have this model, but I have a front loading high efficiency washer. And the principle of this is so cool because it turns the drum and the clothes just sort of fall on one another. It's the sort of modern day equivalent of beating the clothes on the rock instead of using this agitation, which is very inefficient in a top loader. So these are very good at getting the clothes clean. But the most incredibly exciting thing is they spin at a very high speed. It sounds like a jet's taking off in my laundry room. I've had several of these. I got my first one about 12 years ago. But the clothes come out almost dry, not like they come out from a top loader. And, where if you put them in the dryer, it takes forever to get them dry. They come out almost dry from this thing. And so that saves a lot of power. You can get a Energy Star dryer as well, or you can hang it up outside. Okay, solar clothes drying right here. You can put up one of these little clothes things, or you can have a clothesline. And there was just an article in the Washington Post about hanging your clothes out on the line. And most people don't realize how much a dryer, whirling around in the dryer, wears your clothes out. You empty the lint filter. Well, what is that lint that's in the lint filter? It's your clothes wearing out, right? And so when you hang your clothes on the line, they last a lot longer and they look better. So why not try solar clothes drying with a clothesline? Now, let me tell you another secret. Your homeowner association cannot tell you that you can't hang your clothes outside because miraculously, Maryland is, quote, a right to dry state. We have the legal right to dry our clothes outside. And if your homeowner association says, they might make you put your clothes thing like this under your deck or someplace, but they can't tell you you can't dry because you have the legal right to dry. So go for it. Okay. We need to generate all of our electricity with clean renewables. I've already said that. But what I want to tell you is that progress toward electrifying our grid is speeding up. I just got these pictures from a report from the Rocky Mountain Institute. And what they show is that energy change is exponential. Here we are in 2000, not too much wind, but as we go through time, instead of just increasing along a line like this, okay, that's linear, it's curved, it accelerates. We get to 2010, still not that great. 2020, whoa, look at that. Annual wind and solar generation, exponential. So we are going to be, wind and solar in another 15 years, okay? Because the price of wind and solar has dropped. Price of wind has dropped 99% in the last 15 years. Solar, same thing, gotten so much cheaper. And here's how economics works. Once the power generated by wind and solar is so cheap that it's cheaper than so-called natural gas, fossil gas, or coal or oil, nobody's going to want to buy those fossil fuels because they can get everything cheaper with wind and solar and EVs. So the fossil fuel companies have already figured this out. They know this. They are desperate, okay? They're trying to, come up with all kinds of explanations about how they're moving into clean power and everything. It's major greenwashing, which means it's not true, but it indicates to me that they recognize that their time is limited. So they're slurping up all the profits they can right now because they're not going to be able to do it for very long. That makes me feel optimistic. Okay, now where can we put all the wind and solar? There was another article in the Washington Post that really annoyed me because they used this outdated analysis from the Nature Conservancy that talked only about how much farmland it would take if we put wind and solar on farmland. In fact, we don't need to put wind and solar on farmland. We have many, many alternatives to that. We could put some wind and solar on farmland, and we can do like this, advanced agrivoltaics. Agrivoltaics means agriculture near solar panels, voltaics, agrivoltaics. This is a picture from China where somebody had a terrific idea where they mounted solar panels with wavy glass in between, and that wavy glass transmits the light and sort of refracts it around so that in fact it lights the crop underneath much better than just having solid solar panels and shading it. People are clever. People are out there solving these problems like crazy. And when you read about it, it's pretty exciting, actually. I'm excited by how many smart people are out there working on this. So there's plenty of room. Rooftops, parking lots, brownfields, that's like abandoned landfills or old contaminated soil from something. You can put solar panels on there. You can put solar panels on reservoirs, and they call that, I love it, photovoltaics. Photovoltaics, float those panels on the reservoir. That has a lot of advantages. Most reservoirs are, in fact, this one's in Germany, and it's a picture from the same article as this. Most reservoirs are close to cities. So the transmitting the energy, the electricity to the cities is not a huge problem. You don't have to transport, you don't have to send it across country. You maybe send it a few miles into the city. The solar panels don't work very well when they get really hot, but the reservoir water keeps the panels cool. And so they stay more, they're more efficient. And finally, having these panels on the body of water reduces the amount of evaporation, conserving water, which is super important now, especially in the West, because we need to conserve water. So I am so encouraged by bright ideas like this. We don't need to stay with those stupid old ideas like put all the solar on farmland. Well, we need that farmland, right? If we don't need it for growing crops, we need it to increase biodiversity. We don't want to put solar panels on good land like that that's already been cleared, right? We want to put solar panels in useless places, places where you can't do anything else, or smart places like this. The problem, one big problem we are having is with people's attitudes. And this is something we have to get over. This again, League of Women Voters, you guys are civic minded. You understand that you can't stop key progress by saying, I don't want to look at the solar panels. I don't want to look at the windmill. You can't eat the wind turbine. That is not responsible, okay? Because what is the alternative? If everybody says, not in my backyard, NIMBY, not in my backyard. If everyone says, I don't want to look at those solar panels, what are we going to do? Keep using fossil fuels. And then we build a world that is 4 degrees centigrade, like 7 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the one we have now. That's going to be a terrible world. Your backyard won't even be, you can't even grow plants when it's that hot. So this is not a productive point of view, and it's not a civic minded point of view. Okay. So I'm just saying that electrification saves a ton of money. I'm going to just sort of state that right now and say that this is all from Rewiring America. You can look this up. They have calculated that most households will save an average of almost $500 a year after they electrify their appliances. And that's, even before the grid gets cleaned up. All right. And there are major health benefits, as I said, to electrification and clean renewable energy because of the air pollution, the health impacts of air pollution, which in fact costs more than $800 billion a year. And here's the citation for that: $800 billion a year to, sort of deal with the health impacts of air pollution. That's a lot of real money. And of course, it causes a lot of deaths and a lot of personal suffering. More than 60,000 Americans died from air pollution just in 2019. Okay, and air pollution also increases the risk for all these other major diseases, which is part of why people die. Okay, now I want to talk about biodiversity. I've bashed your ear a lot about electrification. I want to tell you about biodiversity and how you can help to rebuild biodiversity in your own yard. Okay, it doesn't matter whether your yard is a condo like this. This is a front yard of a condo owned by, well, she doesn't live there anymore, but a person who works for the Office of Community Sustainability in Howard County. This is, let me see, this is a picture of the former home of Annapolis Green. And these are just some other stock photos. There was a great paper published in 2021 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, very prestigious journal, that outlined 8 simple actions you can take in your own yard to increase biodiversity. 1, convert your lawn into diverse natural habitats. Start around the edges. This is why I have this picture in here. This is from a landscape architect. Start around the edges. Here's a typical house in a suburb with a lot of lawn and no fences. It's all contiguous among houses. Here's one lot. So here's a big house. It's got a few little plants in the front. It's got a few token trees, mostly lawn, right? So people spend a ton of money and cause a lot of emissions mowing their lawn. You start out by putting more trees around the edge, native trees preferably, because they are habitat for a lot of native insects and native animals. You put more trees around the edge, and then you put beds under the trees. You don't have to do it all at once, over a few years. Okay, so it's not insurmountable. No one in their right mind should ever tell you to take out all your lawn right at once and convert it to natural. No, that's just too much work for most people. Do it gradually. Build up the beds around your house instead of the puny little bed in the front with a few, gardenias or, geraniums. Build up some decent beds and plant some plants in there. Perennials where you don't have to go planting them every year. Native perennials are the best. Plant some in the front yard like this. And then if you talk your neighbors into it, they sort of buy into the whole idea. Your community can start having continuous habitat between the houses. This is really good habitat for biodiversity. This is what we need to build up the sort of native animals and plants instead of this, sort of bare landscape that we currently have. Grow native plants. Beware what they call cultivars, like the native species is purple coneflower. Okay. But there's a lot of coneflower cultivars. It comes in different colors. Some of the cultivars are have double blooms. Some of them are different colors. What happens is the native insects that pollinate and feed on the coneflower plants don't recognize these cultivars as being habitat. So you might as well plant a petunia. Okay. So you can grow native plants from seed. I've given other seminars on that. Reduce pesticide and herbicide use in your yard. Okay. Instead of herbiciding everything, try mulching, try high test vinegar, high test horticultural vinegar. Regular kitchen vinegar is 5% acetic acid. I use 20%. You can buy it up to 45%, but I use 20%. I just had good success spraying the little seedlings of Japanese stilt grass in my lawn. So I sprayed the lawn, part of the lawn, with 20% vinegar. The seedlings of the Japanese stilt grass died. The grass didn't die because it had a big root system. Those seedlings have a little thin root like this. If you kill the leaves, the vinegar only kills the leaves. Okay, it doesn't go below ground like Roundup. Roundup goes below ground. You kill that leaf, it has a little tiny root. It cannot come back. That's it. Okay, your grass sprouts back up because it has roots. So I was pretty excited about figuring that out. You can use ground covers, perennial native ground covers. Perfect. Limit the use of exterior lighting. We all know how insects bash themselves to death on lights at night. The best sort of insect-friendly light is amber colored. So there's white, you can get yellow, but amber is the best. I replaced my bulbs with amber lights. And there are some, dead insects, okay, that have accumulated, but nothing like when I have white lights where there'd be, piles of dead insects in the morning. Avoid electric bug zappers because they zap all insects. They don't just zap the mosquitoes, they zap everything, the pollinators, the butterflies, everything. Ditto, mosquito foggers or having the mosquito guys come and spray your yard. That's a terrible idea because it kills all insects, and most insects are beneficial. So that's a terrible idea. Okay, number 5. If you wash your car, try to reduce soap runoff because that harms organisms in the streams. And ditto, driveway sealants and de-icing salts, stuff that you put on your driveway that washes into the surface water can be damaging. Now, here's a few sort of educational things. You can be a role model. When your neighbor says, oh boy, I really hate insects, you can say, most insects are actually beneficial. Here's a bunch of pictures of insects, okay? Well, this is an insect, this is a bat, okay, pollinating. And I think there's probably some spiders, they're not insects, but these are insects. These insects have mostly beneficial impacts. Okay. A lot of them do other interesting things like this is a dung beetle, which finds piles of manure and rolls them into little balls and buries them, and then it lays their eggs on that, and their larvae feed on this dung. And that is a huge public service, right? Because it gets rid of all this manure. Anyway, the more you learn about insects and native plants, the more you can explain to your neighbors who don't know any biology why they are beneficial. So you can counter negative perceptions of insects and native plants. You can become an educator and advocate for insect and plant conservation. So don't just tell people how great they are. You can advocate conservation, and you can get involved in local politics. Hey, League of Women Voters. You can support science, okay? Make sure you get good information, okay? My least favorite phrase has become, I like to do my own research, because a lot of people do their own research on Twitter. No, Twitter is not a good source of information. You need to get, information that is solidly scientifically based. Now, there are a number of excellent scientific organizations who do post on Twitter, but you have to be careful. Okay, so these are things that you can do to make a big difference. And any of you who might be fans of Doug Tallamy, who advocates for what he calls the homegrown national park, all the millions of acres of backyards, if people did these steps and boosted biodiversity in their own yard, then that would really help. I'm going past my time and I'm just about done. So to stop climate change and build a better world, we need to have an attitude adjustment, okay? We need to recognize that all species, humans and everybody, all the other species, we are all connected in an interdependent biosphere. We cannot exist without the whole web of life. We are not like this, okay? This is the picture where humans are sort of at the top of the heap and we are in charge of everything else. No, that is not how it works. We depend on all of the other species. We are in the middle of biodiversity. We are not outside of it looking at it. So what in this view, what affects one species eventually affects all of them. Excuse me. And that is an attitude that will allow us to make the decisions that will eventually save us. Because if we wreck the ecosystem, hey, we're toast too. This is not about saving the earth. It does not need us. The earth has gone through, the earth is 4.5 billion years old, has gone through many phases where species have gone extinct. 99% of all species ever on earth are extinct, but the earth is still here. We are not saving the earth. We are saving ourselves from the uninhabitable earth we've made. If we don't want to be one of the 99% of species that have gone extinct, we need to, get things back into balance. We need to let go of the old world, okay? And this is important. This comes from the future we choose. We need to let go of everybody has their own car. Everybody has their 3-acre backyard. Everyone has a big lawn. There are ways of moving to the future that are, in fact, so much better. Christiana Figueres advises, face your grief. Yeah, okay. Give up the things that we had when we were kids. Most of them are already gone anyway. Face your grief, but then work for a great future. Humans have historically lived more cooperatively. Okay. Right now in the suburbs, everybody has their own house, their own lawnmower, their own, everything. And we don't share our skills. We really don't cooperate very well. Historically, humans have lived more cooperatively, and there's a lot of power in shared work and shared goals and shared rewards. So it's important to see oneself as a citizen, as connected to other people, not just as a consumer. This consumer mentality, and I'm going to go to the mall and buy a bunch of stuff, or I'm going to go on Amazon and buy a bunch of stuff, that has, created a buy something that's not very expensive, use it 3 times and throw it away. The average item of clothing is worn 7 times. That is not sustainable. Finally, defend the truth, extremely important, and defend democracy, also extremely important. And so there's a lot of civic activities that we need to incorporate into our overall attitude, rather than just, I'm looking out for myself and my family and nobody else, because that is not going to make it in the future. Okay, I would welcome any questions that any of you may have. I know it's getting late. Laura is going to manage the questions. Laura, shall I answer is there a question in the chat? Yeah, let me answer Arden's.
Somebody who wanted the slides.
Sorry?
Someone wanted the slides. Insects are fine. I don't like snakes or rodents. That's my fear if I had greenery.
Let me address that. I don't particularly like rodents either. Okay, they're a pain in the neck. You're going to have rodents whether you have greenery or not. Look at urban areas; they have rodents. Okay. I don't particularly like snakes, But I have a lot of black snakes on my property. I have a 3-acre property and a lot of it is sort of wildland. I have black snakes and garter snakes on my property. They will not hurt you. Okay, those are not poisonous snakes. They are afraid of you. If you are worried about stepping into an area where you can't see your feet, take a little stick and just wiggle it around and make a little noise, and all those things will go away. They will never pester you. In a typical suburban lawn with greenery, with shrubs, you're not going to have a bunch of, poisonous snakes. We do have copperheads in Maryland, but they're not going to be, they're not going to build up to intolerable levels with some native plants around your house. And by the way, you can get plenty of ticks on your lawn. So having, bushes and shrubs and herbaceous plants is not going to mean you have more ticks. You have plenty of ticks on your lawn. Linda, I had a few questions coming into this meeting and miraculously you answered them all. Wow, that is amazing. Thank you. I plan to try the induction hot plate. Email me and tell me how you like it, because I think you'll find it's amazing. It'll boil water 3 times as fast as your regular stove, and it'll save you a lot of money. I have been looking for an induction range, that has an oven that has a big enough burner, like a 9 or 10 inch burner that I can actually use my canner on it. So I'm shopping around. There are a few models, but all the appliance companies are now making more models. So that's good. Okay, are there any other questions? You can either put them in the chat or Laura can relay. Who should I be, where should I be looking?
It's all.
You want me to stop sharing?
I don't think there's any in the chat. I think we got the ones in the chat.
We finished the chat. Should I stop sharing?
Yes, you can stop sharing. Thank you so much.
If anybody wants to come up to the computer and ask me a question, where I can see your face, that would be fine. Or you can tell the question to Laura and she can ask me.
I have a question. This is Linda again. Is there a particular website you recommend for the native species for doing the gardening and stuff? Is there one that's really good that you can recommend?
I wouldn't say one.
Okay.
There are a lot of different websites. And actually I Googled native plants for Maryland. And I found a couple of websites that were really great. If you have particular native plants, types of plants that you're interested in, I might know a few that I could tell you off the bat. Like ground covers, native ground covers.
How about just give me your 2 favorite deer resistant plants?
Deer resistant, like showy flowers, not grasses, showy flowers.
Your 2 favorite.
I don't know. I think maybe purple.
Can I say something?
Flower and nothing is totally deer resistant.
Yeah.
Purple coneflower is pretty good. I have to tell you, I was so frustrated by the deer. I have a 3-acre property and I put a deer fence around the whole thing. 2,000 feet of deer fence. And I have not had deer in my yard now for.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just hit the wall. It was like, I got every wildlife. I've got foxes and bunnies and, mice and voles. Okay. Those are native rodents. The whole 9 yards, but the deer were just the last straw. And I said, we're getting rid of them. So
Check out the Department of the Maryland Department of Resources. It's they have a whole, I can put it on the chat.
Natural resources, DNR, the Department of Natural Resources.
Yeah. They have a deer resistant, not totally resistant, but hellebores, and I've got some in my garden.
Yeah, put the thing in the chat. If you can.
I will.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, the deer, I mean, nothing is totally deer resistant, so that's the problem. Any other questions? I would be more than happy to talk to you over email. If you think of a question later and you want to email me, I believe I put my email address in, where did I put it? I put it on the slides.
Yeah, it's in here. We will, it's in the message. We can get it out to everybody
Yeah,
because we'll have yeah.
yeah. Would you like me to send you a copy of the slides, a PDF slide?
Sure, we can put that up.
Yeah, yeah. I just put a little message on the top that I don't like people to reuse the slides, you know, like in their own talks. That has happened to me. And then I hear about it or something. And
Well, we can post the
problem is people
presentation and
don't-
your slides are in the presentation.
no, that's fine. I know, but I just, yeah. It's very hard to give someone else's talk. That's all I'm saying.
It is. You
You know,
can't
because
do
you
it.
got words on the PowerPoint does not mean you can give the talk. And so
It's like teaching someone else's lesson. Really
absolutely.
hard.
Yeah, see, you know, exactly.
I
But
do.
I'm more than happy to send you a handout with the slides.
Well, thank you so much. We've
welcome.
enjoyed our time together and, we'll see you again.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you for all your good work. I
All
appreciate
right.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.